I stood in the hotel lobby watching my sister Melissa adjust the delicate lace sleeves of what should have been my wedding dress, and felt something inside me crystallize into perfect, cold clarity. The dress, my dress, the one I'd saved for 3 years to buy, the one that had hung in my closet with the tag still on for 8 months, while I planned a wedding that would never happen, looked stunning on her. Of course it did. Everything always looked better on Melissa. "You look absolutely radiant," I heard myself say, my voice steady and warm, in a way that surprised even me. The mechanical precision of my own performance was almost fascinating to observe from this strange, detached place I had suddenly found myself occupying. Melissa beamed, spinning slightly so the silk organza skirt caught the afternoon light streaming through the lobby's floor-to-ceiling windows. "Thank you, Emma. I knew you'd understand. When I saw it hanging there, it was like fate was telling me this was meant to be my something borrowed." She paused, tilting her head with that familiar expression of calculated innocence. "Though I suppose it's more like something permanently borrowed now." The sickening thud of realization that had been building for months finally landed. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a last-minute decision driven by wedding panic. This was deliberate, calculated, and perfectly in character for the sister who had spent 28 years systematically taking everything I'd ever wanted. But let me back up, because this moment, this crystalline instant of absolute clarity, didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being Melissa's supporting actress, the lesser sister who existed to make her shine brighter by comparison. Growing up, I'd told myself that Melissa couldn't help being the favorite. She was 3 years older, naturally charismatic, effortlessly beautiful in that golden, conventional way that made adults coo and other children either worship or hate her. I was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who got good grades while Melissa got attention. Our parents never said they loved her more, but they didn't need to. The evidence was in every family photo where I stood slightly behind her, in every birthday party where her friends barely acknowledged my existence, in every Christmas morning where her pile of presents dwarfed mine. "Emma's so practical," Mom would say whenever anyone asked about me, as if practicality were a consolation prize for not being spectacular. "She'll always land on her feet." In high school, Melissa dated Derek Morrison, the Golden Boy quarterback I'd harbored a secret crush on since 7th grade. I'd never told her, of course. I'd learned early that expressing desire for anything Melissa might want was tantamount to gift wrapping it and handing it over. When they broke up junior year, I thought maybe, just maybe, Derek might notice me. We were in the same AP history class, and I'd caught him looking at me a few times, smiling in that shy way that made my heart race. The day I finally worked up the courage to talk to him after class, I found Melissa waiting by his locker. She'd just realized they'd made a terrible mistake breaking up. They were back together by lunch, and she made sure to tell me all about their romantic reconciliation in excruciating detail that evening, watching my face carefully as she spoke. She'd known. Somehow, she'd always known. College provided a brief respite. Melissa went to state on a partial cheerleading scholarship while I earned a full academic ride to a smaller liberal arts school 3 hours away. For 4 years, I lived without constantly measuring myself against her shadow. I made real friends, dated without wondering if every boy was just waiting for Melissa to walk into the room, discovered that I was actually funny and interesting when I wasn't perpetually playing second fiddle. I majored in graphic design, found I had a genuine talent for it, and even started dating James, a sweet architecture student who wrote me terrible poetry and brought me coffee during finals week. For the first time in my life, I felt like the main character in my own story. But college ends and real life begins, and real life meant moving back home while I built my freelance design business. Real life meant Sunday dinners, where Melissa regaled us with stories from her marketing job in the city, her sophisticated boyfriend Marcus, her glamorous apartment with the exposed brick walls. Real life meant slipping back into that familiar role of audience member to Melissa's one-woman show. Still, things were different. I had my own life now, my own goals. I was saving money, building a client base, planning to move to the city myself once I had enough of a financial cushion. James and I were doing long distance, and while it was challenging, we were making it work. I was 25 and finally felt like I was becoming the person I was meant to be. Then Marcus proposed to Melissa on Valentine's Day, and everything shifted back into the familiar pattern of Melissa's life taking center stage while everyone else rearranged themselves around her happiness. The engagement party was a lavish affair at the country club, with Melissa floating through the crowd in a designer cocktail dress that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. She made sure to introduce me to everyone as my little sister, the artistic one, with that particular emphasis that made it sound like being artistic was charming, but ultimately frivolous. Emma's so creative, she'd say, her arm linked through Marcus's. She makes the most adorable little logos for local businesses. It's like having an artist in the family. Marcus would nod politely, clearly struggling to think of something to say to the little sister who made adorable little logos. I perfected the art of smiling and excusing myself to get another drink, another canapé, another breath of air that didn't taste like secondhand dismissal. The wedding planning began immediately, and Melissa threw herself into it with the same focused intensity she'd always applied to being the center of attention. Every family dinner became a wedding planning session. Every phone call home included updates on dress fittings, venue bookings, floral arrangements. Mom and Dad were footing the bill naturally because Melissa had always been their investment grade daughter, while I was more of a savings bond, reliable but not particularly exciting. Meanwhile, James and I had been discussing our own future. We'd been together for 3 years, and while we were taking things slow, there was an understood trajectory to our relationship. We talked about moving in together, about him transferring to a firm in my city, about a timeline that included engagement rings and shared apartments, and all the ordinary magic of building a life with someone. 6 months before Melissa's wedding, James finally proposed. It wasn't elaborate, a picnic in the park where we'd had our first date, a ring he'd saved for months to buy, a speech that made me cry happy tears. It was perfect in its simplicity, perfect in its sincerity, perfect in the way it was entirely ours. I called my parents immediately, practically vibrating with excitement. Mom answered on the third ring. "Emma, how lovely to hear from you." I was just going over the seating chart with Melissa. "Did you know that Marcus's family wants to seat his great-aunt Gertrude at the singles table? The woman is 93 and has been married 4 times. The drama potential is astronomical." "Mom," I interrupted, barely able to contain my news, "James proposed." There was a pause, a beat of silence that stretched just long enough to let all my excitement start curdling into something else. "Oh," Mom said finally. "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. Though I have to say the timing is a bit awkward, isn't it? With Melissa's wedding coming up and all. You know how she gets when she's not the center of attention." The familiar weight settled back onto my shoulders, that old understanding that my joy was always going to be secondary to Melissa's comfort. But I was older now, stronger. I'd learned to stand my ground. "I'm not planning to propose to anyone at her wedding, Mom. I'm just telling you that I'm engaged." Of course, of course. It's just, well, you know how these things go, family dynamics and all. Maybe we could keep this between us for now, just until after Melissa's big day. You understand?" I understood perfectly. I understood that at 28 years old, I was still being asked to dim my light so Melissa could shine brighter. I understood that my engagement was an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a celebration to be shared. I understood that some things never change, no matter how much you grow, or how far you travel, or how hard you work to become your own person. But I agreed because that's what I'd always done. I agreed to keep my engagement quiet for the sake of family harmony. James understood when I explained it to him, though I could see the hurt in his eyes that my family's first instinct was to minimize our happiness. We planned quietly, looking at small venues, discussing intimate ceremonies, budgeting carefully for a celebration that would be entirely our own. I found the dress at a boutique in the Arts District, a simple but elegant design with delicate lace sleeves and a silk organza skirt that moved like water when I walked. It was more than I'd planned to spend, but the moment I put it on, I knew it was the dress. I'd never felt more beautiful, more like myself. I hung it in my closet and looked at it sometimes, imagining my wedding day, the look on James's face when he saw me walking down the aisle. We'd set our date for the fall, giving us time to save more money and plan properly. giving Melissa time to have her moment without competition. The dress hung there for months, a secret promise of my own future happiness. 3 weeks before Melissa's wedding, she called me in tears. Not sad tears, frustrated, angry tears that meant someone had failed to give her exactly what she wanted, exactly when she wanted it. The seamstress completely destroyed my dress, she sobbed into the phone. Some kind of steaming accident, she says, but the entire bodice is ruined, completely unwearable, and there's no time to order another one. 3 weeks, Emma. 3 weeks before my wedding, and I have nothing to wear. I made appropriate sympathetic noises while she detailed the catastrophe. Melissa had chosen a dress that cost more than my car, from a designer whose waiting list was longer than some prison sentences. The seamstress who'd allegedly ruined it was apparently beside herself, offering refunds and recommendations and frantic calls to other designers. But the simple reality was that getting a new designer dress in 3 weeks was impossible. I'm going to have to wear something off the rack, Melissa wailed. Something cheap and ordinary. My wedding is ruined. I'm sure you'll find something beautiful, I said, meaning it. Melissa could make a paper bag look couture. There are lots of lovely dresses available quickly if you're flexible about. Wait. Her voice changed, taking on that particular tone I'd learned to recognize and dread. It was the voice she used when she'd just had an idea that would solve her problem by creating one for someone else. Emma, what size are you now? The question felt like a trap, though I couldn't immediately identify why. Same as always, size 8. Why? Perfect, I need to see your wedding dress. The words hit me like cold water. My wedding dress? That one you bought, the white one hanging in your closet. I saw it last time I was over there. It looked expensive. My mouth went dry. Melissa, that's my wedding dress, for my wedding. Which isn't for months, she said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she'd always used when talking me out of things I wanted. Emma, please, I'm desperate. I just need to try it on, see if it works. You can always get another one. You have time. I can't always get another one. That dress is... It's just a dress, Emma. God, you're being so selfish. This is my wedding, my once-in-a-lifetime day. And you're going to let it be ruined over a dress you're not even going to wear for months? A dress you can replace? The familiar guilt was already creeping in. That old programming that made Melissa's needs feel more urgent and important than my own. But something in me resisted. Some small voice that had grown stronger during my years of independence. I can't replace it, actually. It was custom fitted and the boutique closed down. Melissa, I love you, and I want to help, but... Forget it. Her voice went cold. I should have known you'd choose a piece of fabric over your sister's happiness. I'll figure something else out. Alone. Like always. She hung up, leaving me staring at my phone with a familiar knot of guilt and resentment in my stomach. I knew the pattern. Within an hour, Mom would call to tell me how upset Melissa was, how desperate the situation was, how I was the only one who could help. Then Dad would chime in with his disappointed voice, the one that made me feel like I was 7 years old and had just broken something valuable. The calls came exactly as predicted. Emma, sweetheart, Mom said, her voice heavy with manufactured patience. Melissa told me about your conversation. I have to say, I'm a little surprised by your reaction. My reaction to her asking for my wedding dress? Your reaction to your sister needing help in a crisis. This isn't some casual favor, Emma. This is her wedding day, the most important day of her life, and you have the power to save it. The guilt was a living thing now, writhing in my chest. Mom, it's my wedding dress, for my actual wedding. Which isn't for months. You'll have plenty of time to find something else. Or maybe you could even pick something nicer now that you know what styles work on you. There it was. The subtle implication that my dress wasn't actually that special, that I could do better, that I was being unreasonable for valuing a practice dress over my sister's emergency. Dad called an hour later. Your mother's pretty upset, he said without preamble. Says you won't help Melissa with her dress situation. Dad, she wants to wear my wedding dress to her wedding. It's just a dress, Emma. And it's not like you're getting married tomorrow. Melissa's wedding is in 3 weeks. She needs help now. Just a dress, always just a dress, just a job, just a boyfriend, just a dream. Everything I cared about was always just something when weighed against Melissa's needs. But I held firm. For once in my life, I held firm. Oh, I'm sorry, but no. I can't give her my wedding dress. The family pressure campaign intensified over the next week. Melissa didn't call herself. She was too hurt, Mom explained, too disappointed in me to even speak to me directly. But everyone else had plenty to say. Aunts called with gentle suggestions about the importance of family loyalty. Cousins texted with reminders about how much Melissa had done for me over the years. Though, when pressed, these examples were always vague and unconvincing. Even my grandmother weighed in with a lecture about sisterly love and sacrifice. James watched me field these calls with growing frustration. "They're all acting like she's asking to borrow a sweater," he said, after I hung up from another helpful conversation with my Aunt Carol. "It's your wedding dress, Emma, the dress you're going to wear when you marry me." But the pressure was relentless, and I could feel my resolve weakening under the constant assault of guilt and disappointment. This was the family dynamic I'd grown up with, the one that had shaped me at a cellular level. Melissa's needs were always urgent, always legitimate, always more important than mine. My needs were selfish, petty, easily dismissed. 2 days before her wedding, Melissa finally called me herself. "Emma," her voice was small, defeated, "I found a dress." Relief flooded through me. "That's wonderful. I knew you'd—" "It's awful." She started crying, real tears this time, not the manipulative ones I'd learned to recognize. "It's this terrible off-the-rack thing that doesn't fit right and makes me look like I'm playing dress-up. Marcus's whole family is going to be there, all these sophisticated people, and I'm going to look like a joke." My heart clenched. For all her manipulation, for all the ways she'd hurt me over the years, Melissa was still my sister. The thought of her feeling ugly and embarrassed on her wedding day was genuinely painful. "Maybe we could find a good tailor," I started. "Yeah, there's no time. The wedding is in 2 days. Her voice broke. "Emma, please, I'm begging you. I know it's a huge ask, and I know I've been awful about it, but I'm desperate. I'll do anything. I'll pay you for it. I'll buy you a new dress, a better dress. Melissa." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar surrender beginning in my chest. "If I do this, if I let you wear my dress, you have to promise me something. Anything. You have to promise that after this, we're even. No more guilt trips about what I owe you. No more expectations that I'll always give up what I want for what you want. This is it. The last time?" "Of course," she said quickly. "Absolutely. Emma, you're saving my life." As I drove to her apartment with my wedding dress carefully laid out in the back of my car, I told myself I was doing the right thing. I was being the bigger person, the loving sister, the family peacemaker I'd always been expected to be. James would understand. We could find another dress, or maybe even design something custom for our fall wedding. This was just fabric and lace, I told myself. Just a dress. But as I watched Melissa slip into my dress, watched it transform her into a vision of bridal perfection, I felt something die inside me. This wasn't just about fabric and lace. This was about the last thing that had been entirely mine, and I just handed it over like everything else. "It's perfect," she breathed, turning in front of her full-length mirror. "Emma, it's absolutely perfect. I look like a real bride." The implications stung, as if she wouldn't have looked like a real bride in anything else, as if my dress had magical properties that only worked for her. But I smiled and told her she looked beautiful because that's what the script called for. "You'll be my maid of honor tomorrow, won't you?" she asked suddenly. "I know we haven't talked about it, but with everything that's been so crazy with the dress situation—" Maid of honor, standing beside her while she wore my dress, holding her bouquet, managing her train, smiling for photos that would hang in her house for decades. The final insult wrapped in the language of honor and inclusion. "Of course," I heard myself say. That night, I went home and sat in my empty closet, staring at the space where my dress had hung for 8 months. James found me there an hour later, still staring at nothing. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly, sitting beside me on the closet floor. "Yes, I did." The words came out flat, emotionless. "That's who I am. That's who I've always been. The sister who gives things up." "That's who you were," he corrected. "It doesn't have to be who you are." But as I lay in bed that night, Staring at the ceiling and thinking about the next day, I couldn't imagine who else I could possibly be. This was the role I'd been playing for 28 years. This was my family's understanding of love, one person's happiness requiring another person's sacrifice. Which brings me back to that morning, standing in the hotel lobby, watching my sister adjust the delicate lace sleeves of what should have been my wedding dress. You look absolutely radiant, I heard myself say, and I meant it. She did look radiant. She always did. But something had shifted in that crystalline moment of clarity. Something fundamental had changed in the way I saw this scene, this moment, this entire dynamic I'd been trapped in for my entire life. Because standing there watching Melissa spin in my dress while she told me it was permanently borrowed, I finally understood something I'd been too afraid to see before. This wasn't love. This wasn't family loyalty or sisterly sacrifice. This was theft, plain and simple, wrapped in the language of love and dressed up as tradition. And thieves, I realized, could be stopped. I should go get ready, I said, my voice still warm and pleasant. I want to look perfect for your big day. Melissa beamed at me. Thank you for understanding, Emma. I knew you would. You always do. Yes, I thought as I walked toward the elevator. I always do understand. But understanding and accepting are two very different things. I had 3 hours before the ceremony, and I had some calls to make. The first call was to Sarah Chen, a fashion stylist I'd worked with on a few projects. Sarah had connections throughout the industry, access to sample sales, and designer showrooms that ordinary people never saw. Emma, how lovely to hear from you. How's the wedding planning going? Actually, I need a favor, a big one. I need a dress for this afternoon. Something spectacular. Sarah laughed. This afternoon? Emma, even I can't work miracles. What happened to your wedding dress? The beautiful one you showed me pictures of? Long story, but Sarah, I'm serious. I need something amazing, and I need it in the next 2 hours. Price is no object. Something in my tone must have conveyed the urgency because Sarah's voice shifted into professional mode. What size? What's the occasion? Size 8. It's for a wedding. Your wedding? My sister's. There was a pause. Sarah was sharp. She'd probably figured out enough to understand the situation. I see. Well, I might have something. There's a Valentino sample from last season's collection that never sold. It's been sitting in the showroom because it's a bit too avant-garde for most brides, but for a wedding guest who wants to make a statement. She trailed off meaningfully. Perfect. How much? $2,000. It retails for $8,000. $2,000, most of my savings account. Money I'd been carefully hoarding for my own wedding, my own future. But as I thought about Melissa spinning in my dress, calling it permanently borrowed, the price felt insignificant. Done. Can you have it delivered to the Riverside Hotel downtown? Give me 90 minutes. The second call was to my friend Marcus, not Melissa's Marcus, but Marcus Williams, a photographer I'd worked with who specialized in event photography. He was probably booked solid, but it was worth trying. Emma, what's up? Are you free this afternoon for a last-minute job? Good money. Depends on the job. What's the situation? I need you to photograph a wedding. Not officially, they already have a photographer, but I need someone documenting things from a specific perspective. That's unusual. Can you be more specific? I thought about how to explain without sounding completely unhinged. Let's just say I need evidence of how spectacular I look today. Professional quality evidence. Marcus was quiet for a moment. This sounds like there's a story here. There's definitely a story, but I'll pay you $1,000 for 3 hours of work, and all you have to do is make sure I look like a goddess in every shot. I'm in. Send me the details. The third call was the hardest one. James, are you free to talk? Always. How's the wedding going? Are you surviving the family drama? I closed my eyes, gathering my courage for what I was about to ask. James, I need you to do something for me. Something that might seem crazy. Name it. I need you to come to Melissa's wedding, as my date. There was a long pause. Emma, I thought the whole family decided we should keep our engagement quiet until after Melissa's wedding. Won't showing up together kind of defeat the purpose? That's exactly the point. I took a deep breath. James, she's wearing my dress. She took my dress and she's wearing it to her wedding, and she told me this morning that she considers it permanently borrowed. She what? And I'm done. I'm done being the invisible sister, the one who gives up everything she wants so Melissa can have everything she wants. I'm done making myself smaller so she can shine brighter. Today, I'm going to outshine her so thoroughly that she'll never forget it. Another pause. Emma, are you sure about this? I mean, I'm all for you standing up for yourself, but this is a nuclear level retaliation. It's not retaliation, it's revelation. I'm going to show up looking so stunning, so confident, so absolutely radiant that everyone at that wedding is going to remember me instead of her. And then I'm going to announce our engagement during the reception. During her reception? During the bouquet toss, I said, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. When she throws the bouquet and I catch it, I'm going to hold up my hand and show everyone my engagement ring. I'm going to announce that I'm getting married too, and that I'm so happy I could finally tell everyone. James was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Emma, he said finally, that's the most beautifully diabolical thing I've ever heard. What do you need me to do? Just be there. Look incredible. Be the handsome, successful, wonderful man that you are. And when I announce our engagement, act surprised but thrilled. I won't have to act thrilled, he said. I've been wanting to shout about our engagement from rooftops for months. But are you sure you want to do this? Once you detonate this particular bomb, there's no going back. I thought about my dress hanging in Melissa's hotel room, about the years of being overlooked and undervalued, about the phone calls pressuring me to give up my own happiness for hers. I thought about being introduced as the artistic one and having my career dismissed as adorable little logos. I thought about being asked to keep my engagement secret so it wouldn't overshadow her wedding planning. I'm sure, I said, it's time for me to be the main character in my own story. The dress arrived exactly 90 minutes later, and when I opened the garment bag, I actually gasped. It was stunning. Midnight blue silk with intricate beadwork that caught the light like stars, a fitted bodice that would showcase my figure perfectly, and a flowing skirt that managed to be both elegant and dramatic. It was the kind of dress that whispered sophistication and shouted confidence. More importantly, it was the kind of dress that would photograph beautifully. I spent the next hour getting ready with a focus and attention to detail I'd never applied to my appearance before. Professional level makeup that emphasized my eyes and made my skin glow. Hair swept into an elegant updo that showed off my neck and collarbones. The kind of jewelry that looked understated but expensive. Pieces I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. When I slipped into the dress, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. This wasn't Emma, the supporting character, the practical sister, the one who faded into the background. This was Emma, the leading lady, the woman who owned every room she entered. James arrived an hour before we needed to leave, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal gray suit I had never seen before. You bought a new suit, I said, opening the door. You bought a new dress, he replied, his eyes widening as he took in my appearance. Emma, you look spectacular? That's not a strong enough word. He stepped into my apartment, still staring. You look like you could conquer small countries. Are you sure you want to waste this look on your sister's wedding? I laughed, feeling powerful and beautiful and ready for war. I'm not wasting it, I'm investing it. We arrived at the church 15 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, late enough to make an entrance, early enough to find good seats. I'd timed it perfectly. The photographer was just finishing the family photos and guests were starting to filter in from the cocktail hour. The reaction was immediate and gratifying. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as we walked through the lobby. I heard whispered, "Who is that?" And "She looks incredible," and "Is that Emma?" The last one particularly pleased me. The fact that some people didn't immediately recognize me meant the transformation was complete. Marcus caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle thumbs up. He'd positioned himself perfectly to capture the reactions, and I could see him discreetly photographing the double takes and stares that followed in our wake. We found seats in the third row, close enough to be seen but far enough back to avoid being part of the official family section. James took my hand as we sat down, and I felt the solid weight of my engagement ring, the ring I'd been hiding for months, the symbol of my own happiness that I'd kept secret to preserve Melissa's spotlight. The ceremony began with the usual processional, bridesmaids in pale pink, looking lovely but unmemorable, followed by the flower girl and ring bearer. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating, Melissa's entrance. She looked beautiful, of course. She always looked beautiful. But seeing her in my dress, the dress I'd saved for, dreamed about, planned my own wedding around, felt like watching someone else live my life. The delicate lace sleeves I'd fallen in love with, the silk organza skirt that moved like water, the perfect fit that had made me feel like a princess when I'd tried it on. All of it was hers now, permanently borrowed without my consent. But here's the thing about revenge. It's a dish best served cold, and I'd had months to let mine reach the perfect temperature. As Melissa walked down the aisle, I noticed something I'd been too emotional to see before. The dress, while beautiful, wasn't quite right on her. The proportions were slightly off, the neckline not quite flattering, the overall effect pretty but not stunning. It had been fitted for my body, my proportions, my coloring. On Melissa, it was simply a nice dress. On me, it had been magic. The ceremony proceeded without incident, though I caught several guests sneaking glances in my direction. My Aunt Carol looked particularly confused, clearly trying to reconcile this elegant, confident version of me with the quiet, accommodating niece she was used to dismissing. It was during the recessional that things got interesting. As the wedding party walked back down the aisle, Melissa's eyes found me in the crowd. I saw the exact moment she registered my appearance, the slight falter in her step, the widening of her eyes, the quick, assessing glance that took in my dress, my hair, my overall transformation. For just a moment, our eyes met and I smiled at her. Not the supportive, self-effacing smile I'd been giving her my whole life, but something new. Something that acknowledged what she'd done and promised that the game had changed. She stumbled slightly, enough that her new husband had to steady her, and I felt a surge of satisfaction so pure it was almost intoxicating. The cocktail hour was where the real fun began. James and I made our way through the crowd like celebrities at a premiere, stopping to chat with relatives and family friends who couldn't stop staring. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. "Emma? Oh my goodness, you look absolutely stunning. I hardly recognized you." "Thank you, you look lovely too." "That dress is incredible. Where did you get it?" "Valentino," I'd say casually as if I regularly dropped $2,000 on sample sale dresses. "It's from their latest collection." The name drop had the desired effect every time. A subtle shift in how people looked at me. A new respect in their voices. In my family's social circle, designer names carried weight, and suddenly I was speaking their language. My mother found me 20 minutes into the cocktail hour, her face a masterpiece of conflicting emotions. "Emma," she said, air kissing my cheek with the careful precision of someone who didn't want to disturb my makeup. "You look very nice." "Thank you, Mom. You look beautiful too." I turned to James. "You remember James, don't you?" "Of course." Mom's smile was tight. "James, how unexpected to see you here." "Mrs. Morrison," James said smoothly, taking her hand. "Thank you for including me." Emma looked so beautiful I couldn't resist being her date. Mom's eyes darted between us, clearly trying to figure out what was happening and how to control it. "Well, I suppose it's nice that you could make it. Though I should mention, the photographer is looking for Emma. He wants to get some family photos." "Of course," I said. "But first, I promised James I'd introduce him to some of the family. He's been so curious about everyone." What followed was 45 minutes of strategic socializing that felt like the most sophisticated chess game I'd ever played. I introduced James to everyone who mattered, Dad's business associates, Mom's book club friends, the relatives who controlled the family narrative. I made sure they all knew he was an architect, that he was successful, that he was clearly devoted to me. Most importantly, I made sure they all saw us together, saw how good we looked as a couple, saw that I was no longer the single, slightly pitiful sister who existed in Melissa's shadow. The photographer, Melissa's official photographer, kept trying to corral me for family photos, but I was always just finishing a fascinating conversation, or just about to introduce James to someone important. I was polite but elusive, agreeable but unavailable. Meanwhile, Marcus was working the room like a ninja, capturing everything from artistic angles. He got shots of people's reactions to my entrance, photos of me and James looking like a power couple, images that I knew would tell the story I wanted told. When dinner was finally announced, I'd achieved exactly what I'd set out to do. I'd become the center of attention without appearing to try. People were talking about me, speculating about my dress, wondering about my handsome date. I'd shifted the narrative from Melissa's wedding to Melissa's wedding where Emma looked incredible. The seating arrangement was my first major challenge. As maid of honor, I was supposed to sit at the head table with the wedding party, but I'd never actually agreed to be maid of honor. I'd agreed when Melissa asked the night before, in a moment of emotional exhaustion and guilt. Now, standing in this reception hall looking like I'd stepped off a red carpet, the thought of sitting at that head table felt wrong. It would mean playing my assigned role, being the supportive sister in the background while Melissa held court in my dress. I found the wedding coordinator, a harried-looking woman with a clipboard and a headset. "Excuse me," I said with my most apologetic smile. "I'm so sorry, but there's been a small change. I won't be sitting at the head table after all." "But you're the maid of honor," she said, consulting her seating chart with obvious panic. "You have to sit at the head table." "Actually, I'm not the maid of honor," I said calmly. "There was some confusion earlier, but it's been sorted out. I'll be sitting with my date at table 7. It was a complete lie, but delivered with such confidence that the coordinator simply nodded and made a note. Table 7 was positioned perfectly, close enough to the head table to be seen, far enough away to maintain independence, and populated with some of Dad's more interesting business colleagues and their spouses. James raised an eyebrow as I led him to our new seats. "Table 7? "Table 7, I confirmed. "Much better view." Melissa noticed the change immediately. I saw her scanning the head table with increasing agitation, then searching the room until she spotted me at table 7. Her expression was a fascinating study in confusion and frustration. She couldn't very well make a scene about her maid of honor sitting elsewhere without drawing attention to the fact that she hadn't actually asked me properly in the first place. Our table mates were delighted by the addition of such an elegantly dressed couple. Robert Chen, one of Dad's law partners, immediately launched into conversation about architecture with James, while his wife Patricia complimented my dress with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she knew quality when she saw it. "That's a stunning piece," Patricia said, leaning closer to examine the beadwork. "Is it European?" "Italian," I confirmed. "Valentino." Patricia's eyes widened with appreciation. "Exquisite taste." You know, I was just telling Robert how refreshing it is to see young women who understand the importance of investing in quality pieces rather than following every trend. It was exactly the kind of conversation I'd hoped for, one that positioned me as sophisticated and discerning rather than artistic and impractical. Around the table, I could see the other guests reassessing their understanding of who I was. Dinner proceeded smoothly, with James charming everyone within earshot and me playing the role of confident, successful woman to perfection. I told carefully edited stories about my design work that emphasized my high-profile clients and creative vision. I discussed travel plans with James that painted us as a cosmopolitan couple with sophisticated tastes. Most importantly, I made sure my engagement ring caught the light every time I gestured, though I was careful not to draw direct attention to it. Yet, the speeches began after the main course, and I watched with detached interest as Marcus gave a heartfelt but generic toast about love and partnership. My father followed with his usual blend of humor and sentiment, talking about watching his little girl grow up and finding her perfect match. "Melissa has always been our shining star," he said, his voice warm with paternal pride. "From the time she was little, she had this way of lighting up every room she entered. And Marcus, you're getting a woman who will bring joy and beauty to every day of your life." The words that would have once stung now felt simply irrelevant. Let Dad believe Melissa was his shining star. Tonight, I was creating my own constellation. When the dancing began, James and I took to the floor for a slow song, and I felt the satisfaction of knowing we looked perfect together. He was an excellent dancer, something I'd forgotten in the chaos of the dress situation, and we moved together with the kind of natural chemistry that made other couples look clumsy by comparison. You're enjoying this, James murmured as he spun me gracefully. Immensely, I admitted. Is that terrible? It's honest, and after what she did, I'd say it's justified. So, over his shoulder, I could see Melissa dancing with Marcus, still beautiful but somehow diminished. Maybe it was the way my dress didn't quite fit her proportions, or maybe it was the contrast with my own confidence. But she looked like she was trying too hard to reclaim attention that had already shifted elsewhere. The bouquet toss was scheduled for 10 o'clock, right before the cake cutting. I spent the hour beforehand making sure I was positioned perfectly, close enough to catch the bouquet if I wanted it, visible enough that everyone would see what happened next. At 9:55, I excused myself to the ladies' room for final touch-ups. My makeup was still flawless, my hair hadn't moved, and my dress looked as stunning as it had when I'd first put it on. I was ready. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced as I returned to the reception hall, it's time for the bouquet toss. All the single ladies, please gather behind the bride. This was the moment I'd been planning for hours. I positioned myself in the second row of women, close enough to catch the bouquet, but not so obviously positioned that it would look staged. Melissa stood with her back to us, holding the bouquet of white roses and baby's breath that matched my dress perfectly. She bounced on her toes once, twice, then tossed the flowers over her shoulder in a high arc. The bouquet seemed to hang in the air for an eternal moment, and I realized that this was it, the point of no return. Catching that bouquet would be the signal for everything that came next. The announcement, the revelation, the permanent shift in family dynamics. I could have let it fall. I could have stepped aside and let some other woman catch it, then gone home and continued playing my assigned role as the accommodating sister. I could have preserved the peace and maintained the status quo. Instead, I stepped forward and caught the bouquet cleanly, my engagement ring flashing in the reception hall lights. The crowd cheered and applauded, and I turned to face them with the bouquet in my left hand, my ring clearly visible on my left ring finger. The symbolism was perfect. The woman who caught the bouquet was already engaged. Thank you, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. Actually, this is perfect timing because James and I have an announcement to make. The room went silent. Every eye was on me, every ear waiting for my words. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Melissa turning around, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. James and I are engaged, I said, holding up my left hand so everyone could see the ring that had been hidden for months. We've been keeping it quiet, waiting for the right moment to share our happy news with the family, and what better moment than this? The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps from the crowd, applause from some guests, excited exclamations from others. James appeared beside me as if summoned, wrapping his arm around my waist with perfect timing. Surprise, he said, grinning at the crowd with just the right mixture of joy and sheepishness. We've been terrible at keeping secrets. More applause, more exclamations, more attention focused entirely on us instead of on Melissa. I could see relatives pulling out phones to take pictures, could hear the buzz of excited conversation as people processed this unexpected development. And in the center of it all, Melissa stood frozen in my wedding dress, holding her husband's hand, watching her reception transform into our engagement party. Emma? My mother's voice cut through the chaos, high and strained. What? When did this happen? 6 months ago, I said, still smiling radiant. We wanted to wait until after Melissa's wedding to announce it. We didn't want to steal any of her thunder. The irony was perfect, and I could see from several faces in the crowd that people caught it. Here I was, supposedly trying not to steal thunder, while making the biggest announcement possible at someone else's wedding reception. Dad approached with his politician's smile firmly in place, though I could see the confusion and calculation behind his eyes. Congratulations, sweetheart, he said, hugging me carefully. This is wonderful news. Thank you, Daddy. I'm so happy I could finally tell everyone. The word finally carried just enough weight to suggest that I'd been bursting to share this news for months, implying a level of restraint and consideration that made my announcement seem almost inevitable rather than calculated. Marcus, the photographer, was having the time of his life. I could see him capturing everything: the shock on Melissa's face, The confused delight of the guests, the way James and I looked like a magazine perfect couple in the center of it all. The next 20 minutes were a whirlwind of congratulations and questions. When did we meet? How did he propose? When was the wedding? I answered everything with the kind of glowing happiness that newly engaged women were supposed to radiate. Though beneath the performance, I felt a cold satisfaction watching Melissa try to regain control of her own reception. She finally approached us as the initial excitement was dying down, Marcus trailing behind her like a confused puppy. "Emma," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Congratulations. This is quite a surprise." "Thank you," I replied warmly. "I'm sorry we had to keep it secret for so long, but you know how it is. We didn't want to complicate your wedding planning." The emphasis on your was subtle but pointed. "This was your wedding," I was saying without saying it. "This was your day that you planned around wearing my dress, around being the center of attention, around having everything exactly as you wanted it." "Well," Melissa said, clearly struggling to find the right response. "I'm happy for you, both of you." She looked at James as if seeing him for the first time, taking in his expensive suit, his confident posture, the way he looked at me with obvious adoration. "Thank you," James said, "and congratulations on your wedding. You look beautiful." It was the perfect thing to say, gracious, appropriate, and completely focused on her appearance rather than her happiness or her marriage. Just subtle enough to sting. "We should probably get some pictures," I said, as if the idea had just occurred to me. "Mom, Dad, could we get a family photo with James? I know you'll want something to commemorate the day we announced our engagement." More perfect positioning. I was claiming this day as significant not just for Melissa's wedding, but for our engagement announcement. I was literally rewriting the narrative in real time. The next hour was a masterclass in gracious domination. I made sure we were included in every photo, every conversation, every moment that would be remembered. When people asked about wedding plans, I mentioned we were thinking about a destination ceremony, something intimate and romantic, completely different from the traditional affair we were attending. When someone complimented Melissa's dress, I made sure to mention how lovely it looked on her, with just enough emphasis to make observant listeners wonder if there was a story there. And through it all, James played his part perfectly. He was attentive without being possessive, charming without being overwhelming, clearly smitten without being sickeningly sweet. He was, in short, the perfect foil to Marcus's slightly bewildered enthusiasm. By the time the cake was cut, the dynamic had completely shifted. This was no longer Melissa's reception that I happened to be attending. This was the night James and I announced our engagement, which happened to coincide with Melissa's wedding. The cake cutting itself was almost anticlimactic. Melissa and Marcus performed the traditional ceremony, feeding each other bites while guests took pictures, but the energy felt forced. Half the room was still buzzing about our engagement, and I could see Melissa struggling to recapture the spotlight that had so thoroughly shifted away from her. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, I made sure to position myself and James near the exit. We became the last thing people saw as they left, the final impression of the evening. Everyone who hugged Melissa goodbye also congratulated us on our engagement. Everyone who complimented her wedding also asked about our wedding plans. By the time the last guest had left, I felt like I'd run a marathon. The emotional and physical energy required to pull off such a performance was exhausting, but the results were undeniable. I had successfully transformed from the forgotten sister into the woman everyone would remember. Melissa found me in the hotel lobby as James went to get the car. She'd changed out of my dress into a simple sundress, and without the elaborate styling and formal setting, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Emma," she said quietly, "can we talk?" "Of course." I turned to face her, noting that even in my heels I felt taller than usual. Confidence, it turned out, was excellent posture. "What you did tonight," she started, then stopped, seeming to search for the right words. "What did I do tonight?" I asked with genuine curiosity. "I announced my engagement at a family gathering. I thought that was what people did with good news." "You announced it at my wedding reception, during my bouquet toss. You turned my wedding into your engagement party." I considered this, tilting my head as if the thought had never occurred to me. I suppose the timing was a bit dramatic. But Melissa, we've been engaged for 6 months. We kept it quiet specifically so it wouldn't interfere with your wedding planning. Tonight seemed like the perfect opportunity to finally share our happiness with the family. You could have waited until tomorrow or next week or literally any other time. I could have, I agreed. But catching the bouquet felt like such a perfect moment. Like fate was telling me it was time. Melissa stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if I was being genuine or if this was all an elaborate revenge plot. The beauty of my approach was that it could have been either. Emma, she said finally, I know you're upset about the dress. Upset? I looked down at my Valentino gown, then back at her. Why would I be upset? You look beautiful in it, and I found something even better. The words hit exactly as intended. Not only was I not upset about her taking my dress, but I'd managed to upgrade to something superior. The implication was clear. She'd stolen what she thought was my best, only to discover I had access to things she couldn't even imagine. This dress cost more than most people's cars, I continued casually, but it was worth it to feel this confident on such an important night. Melissa's face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, calculation, and finally, a kind of frustrated defeat. She was realizing that not only had her theft backfired, but it had actually motivated me to outshine her so thoroughly that her wedding would forever be remembered as the night I announced my engagement. I should go, she said abruptly. Marcus is waiting upstairs? Of course. Congratulations again on your wedding. You and Marcus make a lovely couple. She walked away without looking back, and I felt the last piece of my old life fall into place. The accommodating sister, the one who gave up what she wanted for the sake of family harmony, was officially retired. James appeared beside me a moment later, offering his arm. Ready to go home, fiancé? Ready, I said, taking his arm and walking toward the exit. Though I have to say, I'm already looking forward to our wedding. It's going to be spectacular. More spectacular than tonight? I thought about the last 8 hours. The dress, the entrance, the announcement, the complete rewriting of family dynamics. I thought about Melissa upstairs, probably crying about how our special day had been ruined while I was heading home feeling more powerful and confident than I'd ever felt in my life. Much more spectacular, I said, because it will be entirely ours. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The family drama had reached critical mass, and everyone had opinions about my behavior at the wedding. Mom's text was predictably guilt-laden. Emma, I'm very disappointed in how you handled last night. We need to talk. Dad's was more diplomatic. Congratulations on your engagement. Perhaps we could discuss the timing when emotions are less raw. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins weighed in with everything from congratulations to condemnation. The family group chat had apparently exploded sometime around midnight, with people taking sides and relitigating decades of family dynamics. But the text that mattered most came from my grandmother, the family matriarch whose opinion carried more weight than everyone else's combined. Emma, darling, what a performance last night. Your grandfather would have been proud. Call me when you're ready to plan a real wedding. Love, Grandma Rose. I laughed out loud reading it. Grandma Rose had always been the sharpest person in our family, the one who saw through everyone's pretenses and politics. If she approved of what I'd done, then I'd played the game correctly. The phone rang as I was making coffee, and James's name appeared on the screen. Good morning, Scandal, he said when I answered. How are you feeling? Surprisingly good. I expected to feel guilty or conflicted, but mostly I just feel free. Free from what? Free from being the sister who always gives things up. Free from being the one who makes herself smaller so Melissa can shine brighter. Free from a dynamic that never served anyone except her. James was quiet for a moment. Do you think she'll forgive you? It was a fair question, and one I'd been considering since I woke up. Did I want Melissa's forgiveness? Did I care if our relationship recovered from this? Honestly, I don't know if I want her forgiveness. What I did last night wasn't something I need to be forgiven for. I announced my engagement at a family gathering. I wore a beautiful dress to a wedding. I was charming and gracious and appropriate. The fact that it overshadowed her has more to do with her own insecurity than with any actual wrongdoing on my part. That's a very diplomatic way of describing psychological warfare. I laughed. Maybe. But James, for the first time in my adult life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I feel like the main character in my own story instead of a supporting player in hers. Well, I have to say, you make an excellent main character. Last night was the most fun I've had at a wedding in years. Even though we probably destroyed my relationship with my sister? Emma, James said seriously, what kind of relationship did you actually have with her? One where you gave up everything you wanted and got nothing in return? One where your happiness was always secondary to hers? That's not a relationship worth preserving. He was right, of course. The relationship I'd had with Melissa wasn't based on mutual love and respect. It was based on a power dynamic that required my submission for her dominance. By refusing to submit, I'd ended that dynamic forever. The calls from family members continued throughout the day, each conversation following a predictable pattern. They'd start with congratulations on my engagement, then move to concerns about my timing, then finally circle around to suggesting that I owe Melissa an apology. I perfected a response that was both gracious and immovable. I'm sorry if my happiness caused any confusion, but James and I have been engaged for 6 months. We felt it was time to share our joy with the family. By the third or fourth repetition, I realized I sounded exactly like a politician, acknowledging concern without accepting responsibility, expressing regret without admitting wrongdoing. It was a skill I'd apparently inherited from Dad, though I'd never had occasion to use it before. The only call that rattled me came from Melissa herself, 3 days after the wedding. Emma. Her voice was flat, emotionless. We need to talk. Okay, I said, settling into my desk chair and preparing for whatever was coming. What you did at my wedding was unforgivable. What exactly did I do that was unforgivable? You know what you did. You planned that whole thing. The dress, the announcement, stealing my photographer. I didn't steal your photographer. I hired my own photographer to document my engagement announcement. You hired a photographer to upstage me at my own wedding. I considered this accusation. Was it true? Had I hired Marcus specifically to upstage Melissa? Or had I hired him to document what I expected to be an important moment in my life? Melissa, I said finally, I hired a photographer to capture the moment James and I announced our engagement to our family. If that upstaged you, I'm sorry, but I'm not responsible for managing your feelings about my happiness. Your happiness? This wasn't about happiness, Emma. This was about revenge. Revenge for what? For the dress. For me borrowing your dress. Borrowing? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Melissa, you told me the dress was permanently borrowed. That's not borrowing. That's taking. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I would have given it back, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. When? After your wedding? After you'd worn it down the aisle and had it photographed and made it part of your wedding story forever? When exactly would you have given back my wedding dress? Another silence. I needed it more than you did, she said finally, and there it was. The core of our entire relationship dynamic distilled into 7 words. Melissa's needs always trumped mine because she needed things more than I did. She needed attention more, needed validation more, needed to be the center of the universe more. You needed my wedding dress more than I needed my wedding dress? You weren't getting married for months. I was getting married in 3 days. So my timeline was less important than yours. Emma, don't make this into something it's not. What is it then? Explain to me how taking my wedding dress without asking, keeping it permanently, and then dismissing my feelings about it is anything other than theft. It's family. It's what sisters do for each other. Really? What have you ever done for me that was even remotely comparable? The question hung in the air between us, and I realized I was genuinely curious about her answer. In 28 years of sisterhood, what had Melissa ever sacrificed for my benefit? I've done plenty. Name one thing. One specific example of you giving up something you wanted so I could have something I wanted. The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. This is ridiculous, Melissa said finally. I shouldn't have to justify our entire relationship because you decided to throw a tantrum at my wedding. I didn't throw a tantrum. I announced my engagement. You announced your engagement during my bouquet toss. You turned my reception into your engagement party. You showed up in a dress that cost more than most people's rent and made sure everyone knew it. You hired a photographer to document yourself upstaging me. If that's not a tantrum, I don't know what is. I considered her words carefully. From her perspective, I supposed it did look like an elaborate, calculated tantrum. From my perspective, it felt like the first time I'd ever stood up for myself in our relationship. Melissa, I said quietly, do you love me? What? Of course I love you. You're my sister. Do you like me? A pause. What kind of question is that? Do you actually like who I am as a person? Do you enjoy my company? Do you value my opinions? Do you see me as an individual with my own wants and needs and dreams? Or do you see me as a supporting character in your life? Emma, this is because I've been thinking about it, and I'm not sure you've ever seen me as anything other than an extension of yourself. Someone who exists to make your life easier, to give you what you need when you need it, to celebrate your successes and minimize my own so you can shine brighter. That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my life without relating it back to your own? When was the last time you supported my goals without suggesting how I could modify them to benefit you? When was the last time you put my needs ahead of your own? Another long silence. Emma? Melissa said finally, her voice softer now. I know I can be selfish sometimes, but taking my wedding as an opportunity for revenge? It wasn't revenge, I interrupted. It was revelation. I revealed that I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm not the sister who will always give up what she wants for what you want. I'm not the woman who will make herself smaller so you can feel bigger. I'm not your supporting character anymore. So what are you then? I'm the main character in my own life. And in my own life, I wear beautiful dresses and announce my engagement when it feels right and refuse to apologize for taking up space. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel her processing this new version of me. I don't know how to be sisters with this version of you, she said finally. Then maybe we're not sisters anymore, I replied. Maybe we're just two people who happen to share parents. Emma, Melissa, I have to go. James and I are looking at venues today. For our actual wedding, in our actual wedding clothes, on our actual wedding day. I hung up before she could respond, and I felt something settle in my chest. Relief, maybe. Or closure. Or just the simple satisfaction of having said exactly what I meant, without worrying about how it would affect someone else's feelings. 3 months later, James and I were married in a small ceremony overlooking the ocean. I wore a dress I'd designed myself with the help of a seamstress friend. Something entirely unique, entirely mine, that no one could ever claim was permanently borrowed. The guest list was carefully curated. Grandma Rose was there, of course, along with friends who celebrated our happiness without reservation. My parents came, though the relationship remained strained. Several cousins attended, clearly fascinated by the family drama and eager to witness the next chapter. Melissa was invited but didn't come. She sent a card with a generic message about wishing us happiness, signed by both her and Marcus. It felt like a form letter, which was probably appropriate for the relationship we had now. Marcus, my photographer friend, captured everything beautifully. But more importantly, he captured the way I felt, confident, radiant, absolutely certain that I was exactly where I belonged. During the reception, as James and I danced to our song, I caught sight of myself in the mirrors that lined the venue walls. I looked like a woman who had never doubted her worth, never made herself smaller, never given up her dreams for someone else's convenience. I looked like someone who had always been the main character in her own story. Any regrets? James murmured as he spun me gracefully. I thought about Melissa, probably at home wondering if she should have handled things differently. I thought about the dress hanging in her closet that would always remind her of the sister who'd stopped playing by her rules. I thought about the family dynamics that would never quite recover from the night I'd refused to stay in my assigned role. None, I said, and meant it completely. The woman who had stood in her sister's shadow for 28 years was gone. In her place was someone who understood that love didn't require sacrifice, that family didn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's worst impulses. The orchestra played, the guests danced, and for the first time in my life, I was the undisputed star of my own story. And it was even better than I'd imagined it would be. 6 months after my wedding, I received a text from Melissa. Saw your interview in Design Weekly. Congratulations on the promotion and the new clients. Your work looks incredible. It was the first time she'd ever complimented my professional achievements without qualifying it with something about it being cute or adorable. It was, I realized, the first time she'd ever seen me as a peer rather than a little sister. I texted back, "Thank you. I'm really proud of how far the business has come." It wasn't an apology from either of us, and it wasn't a return to our old relationship. But it was perhaps the beginning of a new one between two adults who respected each other's autonomy rather than one sister who dominated and another who submitted. And if we never got back to that new relationship, if the damage was too fundamental to repair, that was okay too. Because I'd learned something invaluable at her wedding. The most important relationship in my life was the one I had with myself. And that relationship was finally, beautifully, exactly as it should be. The dress still hangs in my closet sometimes. Not my original wedding dress, but the midnight blue Valentino that started it all. I wear it to important events, business dinners, occasions when I need to remember who I am and what I'm capable of. It's a reminder of the night I stopped being a supporting character and claimed my starring role. And every time I put it on, I remember that moment of crystalline clarity in the hotel lobby, watching my sister adjust the sleeves of my stolen dress and feeling something fundamental shift inside me. That was the moment I stopped accepting less than I deserved. That was the moment I learned that sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when, especially when, those boundaries hurt the people who have benefited from your boundaryless existence. That was the moment I became the woman I was always meant to be. Someone who shines not by dimming others, but by refusing to be dimmed herself. And that, I think, is the most beautiful dress of all.